I cannot resist and not tell you a joke that I heard maybe 40 years ago in Moscow. A joke went like this. There are two kinds of people in the United States in terms of thinking about future. Pessimists and optimists. So the optimists were studying Russian. Well, what would the pessimists do then? The pessimists were studying Chinese. It seems that they were right. So if we are talking about future, probably China will be more instrumental in defining future than Russia. Of course, I'll be very happy to respond to your questions if you have any about Russia, Ukraine, whatever. But I decided to focus on the United Nations, the other area of my experience and skills. United Nations, our last best hope, as JFK said in his inaugural address, and it still is. And when we think about the future, frankly, I personally don't see anything that can replace the United Nations as an instrument for shaping the future, for dealing with the challenges that we all have. And it's not only peace and security. It's not only terrorism and narcotics. It's not only environmental protection and climate change. It's also development, it's also gender equity, it's also education, it's also human rights, dignity, and so on. Everything. United Nations deals with everything. But most importantly is that United Nations deal with global problems. And global problems need global solutions. And we have no other instrument that can deal with this kind of global problems. So United Nations is, imperfect as it is, it's our only hope for shaping the future. Now, why it is relevant for our discussion today? I also thought that our future is you. You are future decision makers. I mean, students of this school and other schools in this country and all around the world. Today you are making decisions that affect your lives and make your teachers and parents happy or miserable or both. But tomorrow you are going to make decisions that are going to shape this country and indeed the world. And you are the decision makers of tomorrow, and United Nations is going to be your instrument in shaping the planet. So my talk today is about you and the United Nations. A particular aspect of this is the following. When we met last time, as I said, I was very amazed by the level of interest in international affairs that students in this school have. And in discussions with some of you, I heard that many think about probably a career in international affairs, foreign service, and so on. So what I'm going to talk about today is you and the United Nations. Is it a good fit? What does it take to be a successful, effective, and happy United Nations staff member? Some of these things are obvious, and you would certainly understand that to work with the United Nations, you have to be tolerant, you have to be energetic, you have to be honest, you have to be adaptable, you have to be respectful to others. But I'll focus more on the things that are not so obvious. At least they were not obvious for me when I started working for the United Nations in '89. And I want to share with you some of my personal observations in this matter and to help you decide when the time comes whether a career with the United Nations would be good for you or maybe not. So I believe that The recipe for being a happy and effective United Nations staff member is for someone to have a healthy combination of idealism and cynicism. And I stress a healthy combination of both. Why idealism, you understand? That's intuitive. United Nations is not just any job. You must have a passion, a drive, desire to make a difference. It's not just a job, it's a mission. Otherwise, you are not going to be happy, you are not going to be effective. There are lots of people who just go through the motions and they live through the work week waiting for the weekend. I don't think this is what you want to do with your life. You have to have genuine respect for other cultures and traditions and religions, habits, everything. And I stress the word genuine. Not just be politically correct, not just be polite. People immediately sense when you are just pretending to be friendly, or you do it because you have to be politically correct, as opposed to being genuinely open-minded, friendly, curious, interested in other cultures, in other traditions, in other ways of doing things. And maybe you would not agree with me, but I believe, having been in it for many, many years, that maybe this is particularly difficult for Americans. Particularly difficult. Because, this manifest destiny thing, exclusivity, it's in your genes, it's in your DNA. And I do not mean it as a criticism. It's fine, it's excellent. America is an idea, it's not a country. At least this is how it is seen from outside of the United States. So it's excellent to have this backbone in you. But it should not interfere with your interaction with other cultures, other traditions, no matter what you may think about them, whether you like them or you don't like them. You have to genuinely accept and respect them. It has to be in your insides. I see a sign that I'm 10 minutes marked. 5 more minutes, okay?
Please.
Related to this is another thing. If you work with the United Nations, you are not expected to hide your political views and your patriotism. But you are supposed to work for the world, not for your country. When you join the United Nations, you take an oath that you are not going to accept any instructions from your government. You only work for the United Nations. Sometimes it's difficult. Sometimes it's tempting to help your own country if you know something, but you have to understand very clearly the priorities and your obligations to the international community rather than your own country. These are all understandable and clear things. Now about cynicism. Why cynicism? Healthy cynicism. Because you have to understand and accept how huge bureaucracies work. If you don't, you get frustrated and burnt out in a couple of years. And I've seen so many young, enthusiastic, young men and women from all over the world, but particularly from Europe and the United States, come to the United Nations and leave in disgust and frustration 2 or 3 years later because things did not work the way they imagined things would work. So you have to understand that United Nations is a huge bureaucracy. Works not on internet time. Some people say that it works on geological time. Maybe somewhere in between. But you have to be very, very patient. Things happen, but things happen very, very slowly. You have to understand that major policy decisions in the United Nations. And remember, last time we discussed the difference between the United Nations as an intergovernmental organization and United Nations as a secretariat. These are two different United Nations, and you should never, never mix them up. United Nations is an intergovernmental organization. It's diplomats, governments, who are there to talk to each other. I'm talking today about the Secretariat, international civil servants, who work for the intergovernmental process, who serve the intergovernmental process. But what I'm talking about, what I'm saying about the decision making applies to both. Decisions are made not on the basis of merit of a case, but most often on the basis of political trade-off, compromise, very often on the basis of the least common denominator, which is frustrating, of course. But that's the way it is, because it's very difficult to find a compromise among almost 200 participants. Now, same with personnel decisions. If you join the United Nations, your career will depend not only on your merit, but also on political correctness squared, because it's an international organization. And in addition to all the normal balances that you see in a national setting, gender balance, nationality balance, racial balance, and so on, you have to have balance between different continents, between different groupings, and so on. In the end, merit always wins. But sometimes it takes years, if not decades, for someone to prove that she or he is worthy of advancement in their career. And probably the last point, but most important one. If you want personal public recognition, if you want your name in the papers, United Nations is not for you. Work in the United Nations is anonymous. There are no names on United Nations documents. You, as a member of the Secretariat, are expected to be very efficient, but not seen. I'm finishing, Sarah. You are considered hired help. And for some people, it's not acceptable, and they want to be prima donnas. They want to be seen, they want to speak, they want to be noticed. If you are like this, don't go there. You'll be frustrated, you'll be unhappy, you won't be effective. Don't waste your life. Thank you.